All right, looks like we are live. I'm here with Matt Shell. You may know him as Matt MirrorFish on YouTube. My name is Charles with Infallible Code. And today we're just going to hang out and talk a little bit about Unity, game development, and programming. If you're not familiar with either of our channels, that's kind of the theme, the running theme between both of our videos. Matt does tutorials. Lately, he's been posting about scriptable objects, so I already see some comments in the chat about that. And if you've seen any of my videos, you know that I focus on programming and clean coding. So I see we've already got some questions in the chat. I see Tron's here. Etienne, thank you guys for coming in, and I'm sure we'll get some more folks rolling in as we get started here. We'll just put everything on blast. Matt, why don't you give a little introduction about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, Charles, thanks so much for having me on early in the morning here, or mid-morning in Europe, early in the morning on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Super happy to be here. I've really been enjoying the content that you've been doing on your channel.
Thank you.
I think it's really great. You know, I've been a long time participant in the Unity tutorial universe, both in my work at working for Unity. I was part of their Learn team for many years, creating a bunch of the official tutorials for them. And now just recently I've left and joined Thousand Ant, which is a company based out of New York, but distributed around the world with my partner, Sam Eng. And we have just launched our own YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/thousandant, where we're going to be publishing a lot of tutorials, devlogs, and general game dev tips and advice, and kind of with the focus on, and one of the reasons I'm so happy to be here with you is with the focus on some of this, what I'm kind of calling like level 2 content, right? So you've gotten past that like strict beginner stage where like, how do I even do anything? And now you're like, okay, I've done some game jams, or I've made some small games, and now I kind of want to be like, okay, now I have this idea for maybe something that's trending towards a commercial game, and I want to make something a little bigger, right? And as you know, and I think as a lot of people in your audience may have experienced, right, that's a little bit of a different animal, right? You start to,
Yeah.
You know, it can get a little hairy in there, right? And so that's one of the threads that I want to kind of pull on with the content that we're doing. And as you mentioned, you know, so I've actually been publishing on my personal channel, my Matt MirrorFish channel, which you can find by searching. And one of the threads that I've been working on there is about scriptable objects, right? Scriptable objects are a super powerful tool in Unity that I feel like are a little bit under evangelized, right? Underutilized.
Well, you've got that one Ryan Hipple video.
Yeah.
Everyone loves.
This is the canon of scriptable objects, right? Ryan Hipple's Unite talk from 2017, and then of course Richard Fine's Overthrowing the Monobehavior Tyranny, right? Great title. Overthrowing the monobehavior tyranny in a glorious script.
How do they like that term at Unity? That verbiage.
I mean, nobody complained. I don't think. Yeah. It's funny though. Yeah, no, I mean, and he's an incredible developer, and I think that he kind of was one of the people to kick that off as a kind of an idea, right? To start really drawing attention to that. And for me, that was the moment when I first started to get excited about some of those kind of patterns, and even just design pattern thinking, right? Or code pattern thinking, right? That was a little bit of a revelation for me. And then I started to read some books about software design and started to try to, which I'm still like a total baby with, right? My background is that I'm totally self-taught, copying and pasting from the Unity forums guy. You know, that's really where I came from. Which is kind of partly why I can like empathize with a lot of people who are coming from that background as well, right? I don't have a CS degree. So yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun, and you know, I'm at like this little turning point, just having left Unity. I haven't been there for 5.5 years, and now starting to focus more on publishing content, you know, as myself on YouTube, which I'm super pumped to be doing. Yeah. And yeah, it's a great moment.
Cool, man. That's awesome. Yeah, we're going to dive into all that scriptable objects, and I'd like to talk about that level 2 that you mentioned, because that's definitely something that's been on my mind. But before we get into that, just want to mention that we are going to be having a giveaway during the stream. I'm going to give out the the details for that in a moment. I see we've got some more folks in the chat, some more familiar faces. I never know how to say your name, Urizer, but very active user in Discord. So thanks for coming out. I see Dapper Dino. Hey, how's it going? I see again. There's some questions that we had there. Don't worry, we will definitely get to them. I'm not going to ignore the chat. Hey, look, Thousand Ant. Is that your?
Yeah,
Is that your?
I just realized I'm actually logged into the Thousand Ant account. That's good.
Oh, okay, that's you.
That's the account that I actually want to draw attention to. So I'll post as that account. That's funny though. I didn't notice that that's the tab I was in.
Awesome. Urizer. All right, cool. Yeah. He gave me the pronunciation. I always struggle to say names because I'm afraid I'm going to say it completely wrong. So yeah, cool. Lots of familiar faces here. Some developers in the chat. Cool, man. This is great. So yeah, I'll be dropping a link to that giveaway in a moment. Just wanted to let folks have an opportunity to get in here. If you guys don't mind hitting that like button, it helps get the word out, and then sharing, doing retweets, and all that sort of thing. That'll help some more folks get in here, and we can give everyone an opportunity to get into that giveaway. So I'll post that in a couple minutes here. This live stream is kind of part of a series of streams that I want to start doing, where I get other content creators, as Matt mentioned, other YouTube tutorial makers, whatever you want to call them. We all know there's definitely a growing space of folks like Dapper Dino as well, who's in the chat, who are trying to create educational content for Unity, because it's definitely it's a challenge. It's a challenge because Unity is so easy to get into. That the whole democratization of game development and all that. It makes it so simple. You can download it in a couple minutes. You watch a tutorial, you've already created a real cool little prototype. But I think it's that level 2, that is something that a lot of folks are realizing that, okay, I've created this simple prototype. I can move an object around my space. How do I take it to that level where it's something that's deployable? It's something that I can get into the hands of a user. And how do I get my ideas, which are typically your ideas are more advanced than a ball that rolls around a scene and collects coins. How do I make that idea come to life? So I think that's something we're going to be touching on a lot during this stream. So I feel like once we get started chatting, it's going to be nonstop. So what I'm going to do is just do the giveaway now. So I'm going to grab that link. All you got to do is go to, and I'm not sure if this is going to work. Let's see if I drop this in the chat, if YouTube doesn't disregard it. Let me drop that in there. Go to that link, gleam.io. Oh, look, it took it. Yeah, cool. Oh, look, I see TNTC in here too. Hey, man, how's it going? Look at this. We got a whole bunch of creators. That's great.
Shout out to TNTC. They're really great content creators based out of Italy that I've worked with a bunch. Really love the stuff that they do. Content in both Italian and in English for any Italian members of our audience. Really awesome, like mechanic reconstruction stuff. Highly recommended.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely recommend them. So yeah, you just go to this link here, and hopefully it won't be too difficult. This is the second time I've used Gleam. So if anyone has any issues with it, let me know, and we'll try something else. But go to that link, follow the instructions, and then at the end I'll pull it up and we'll draw a winner here, and I'll hand out a voucher. So. All right, so yeah, let's dive into it. The first thing I definitely want to talk about is that level 2 that you mentioned, because it's something that it's hard to say that it's missing now, because I think a lot of people are doing it. They're putting out that level 2 content. I think what's missing, so to speak, is the awareness of it, and even the awareness that you need that.
Right. I think that's a good point. I mean, I think that we're in the internet, right, is infinite and endless, and there's no shortage of information, right? I think that what maybe the moment is that there are more people starting to recognize that they need it, or starting to say, okay, man, maybe I really do need to start to think about design patterns, or trying to have clean code, or trying to kind of architect things in a scalable way. Now, for me, I can say that did I turn up my mic? I'm getting some feedback. Oh, weird. Is that the Zoom?
It might be coming from me. I don't know. I have a backless headphones, and sometimes that kind of bleeds out. Let me know
Oh, okay.
if I
All
get
right.
too loud.
Let me. What's the best way to do this?
And Chad, if you hear anything with the audio, let us know.
Yeah, Chad, are you hearing doubling, or is this just me? I can also just. Oh, let's see if that's better.
While he fixes that, yeah, that awareness. So when I first started creating
Sorry.
content and tutorials, my first tutorial series was on test-driven development. And as you can imagine, that topic, if you're not familiar with test-driven development, um, it's pretty. I would say it's kind of an advanced concept because it's not really about per se how to write code or use design patterns. It's a development process. So like I skipped all the steps of architecture and solid principles and things like that, and I jumped right into describing a development process, test-driven development. And you get a lot of comments like, why would I do this? This is too complicated. And at the time, I had tunnel vision because I'm trying to teach this process that I use and I found so helpful. But a lot of those comments were valid because, I'm coming from from a place where I am a professional software developer. I went to school for it. I've been working in a business environment, an enterprise environment. And even today, my day job is to develop software for like power plants, security and compliance software. And so I think that a lot of folks who come in and get Unity, they get started, and like Matt, who it's all self-taught. You're looking at documentation. You're looking at
Yeah.
YouTube tutorials. You don't have a software development background, and so someone starts telling you, "Yeah, you should learn architecture. You should learn these design patterns." You're like, "Why?" Like I just made this
I just
prototype.
want to make a game, bro.
I just want to make a game, man. What's the big deal? And I get the sentiment, but that awareness is something that I think that's finally building now, where it's like, oh, that's right. Eventually, this code, I have to maintain this code, and
Yeah, exactly. Even
yeah,
and honestly, jumping back in there. Even
yeah.
if you know what happened is Twitter started playing the stream in like another. I'm like, what the hell's going
Oh,
on
that's what
here?
happened.
Sorry about
That's
that.
funny.
It's
That's
mine.
funny.
It's on my end. So I had like this time lagged stream going. I'm like, whoa. Okay, I'm back. I'm back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that thing is, for me, I only learned that through misery and pain, right? Through getting dragged through the valley of sorrow and having my projects fall apart and like, seeing the Tower of Babel fall over before my eyes, right? So I don't know, and I wonder, and I'd be interested to hear, from the chat if what you think about this, but is this something that I wonder if you tell people, hey, you need to know this, is that something that they're going to kind of believe, or is it like, do they have to go through the suffering and misery first? I don't know.
Yeah. That's an interesting concept because wisdom is learning from those who have gone through it. But maybe wisdom isn't what people need. Maybe people need to just suffer through it. But I think it's I think if you suffer through a couple pain points, then
Yeah.
you can go and say, all right, I think I need to go ahead and start listening to folks who have the wisdom, the knowledge to share. But I guess everyone's different too. Because then on the flip side of that, you get a lot of people that I see in my comments who they're all about it. They're on board, and that can also be sort of a little detrimental because I see an approach where it's like, oh, I've learned one design pattern. I see the value of it. Now I want to learn all the design patterns, and I want to approach my code thinking about the design pattern first. How do I get MVC? How do I implement
Yeah.
MVC in my and it's like, whoa. You got to start from a place of I have a problem, and then the design pattern solves it. You don't start from a place of I have a design pattern that I need to use.
I have a hammer. I'm
Yeah,
gonna hit
exactly.
everything with the
Give me a
hammer,
nail.
Yeah. No, I think that's a real, and also I think one of the risks that people have, and maybe this is more people who are learning design patterns for the first time, but I think also even some experienced folks are like, well, if we go and add this, then it's not MVC anymore. It's not model view controller anymore. It's some kind of weird hybrid pattern, and we do, now we're breaking everything, and it's, I feel like people get kind of religious and dogmatic, about certain patterns. They're like, well, we're using this pattern, so you can't do that, and it's like, well, I feel like people, there's a pragmatic layer that I think, again, yeah, it's funny. It's like the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? It's like
Yeah.
you have the knowledge, you know what the pattern is, but do you have the wisdom to kind of apply it in the right moment and be flexible, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I see a super chat came through. Thank you, TJ053. Really appreciate it. He says, I just started making content with Unity. Is it better to make extremely basic tutorials for new developers or for people who have some knowledge? I would say a lot of my answer depends on a lot of different things. Like, what is your style of creating? Do you have anything new to offer? I would say extremely basic tutorials. I feel like that's pretty saturated at this point. I think there's a lot of developers who are creating very basic tutorials for new developers for Unity. So unless you have some sort of gag or something to set yourself apart, I would probably recommend diving into the level 2 stuff if you feel like you could provide value there. I wouldn't say that you should create content if you're not equipped to do so, I guess, as a nice way to say it. You know what I mean?
No, I think that's a good perspective. I mean, I think in terms of the content, what's needed this is getting a little meta, right? What's needed in the content creator landscape, but I think that uniqueness, right, is really key. And I think what you'll find is that starting with something that's very narrow and focused, or trying out things that are narrow and focused on something that you are actually really interested in, will help you to gather a group of people who are also interested in that. And what you'll find, and this is true about anything where you're publishing work, what you'll find is you might think that this idea is great and you publish it and then nobody cares, right? And you have this one idea that's like a little throwaway a little bit. You're like, oh, this is just a simple, I'm just gonna do this. And then suddenly everybody's like, oh yeah, that, more of that. And you're like, oh, okay, sure, yeah, I'll make more of that. So I think that just getting started, right? Don't overthink it in the beginning, just get started and then see what people respond to, right? And what people like.
Yeah. Tron said something interesting that I really like, and I'm jumping around the chat here. But he mentioned that like a lot of Unity tutorial creators are like the first bump of the Dunning-Kruger curve, which is that I don't even know how to explain that. I don't even know how to articulate what that is. But basically, it's like as you learn something, there's like this curve of your knowledge. And I guess the first bump is like, it's this point where you have just enough information to be dangerous, I think. And Tron, feel free to correct me, but it's like, I work with some people who have just enough vocabulary, technical vocabulary to be dangerous. They'll come in and say, hey, can you use a data model to structure this or to solve this problem? It's like, just tell me what the problem is at a high level. Don't try to talk to me in terms of technology. It's the same thing with design patterns. Someone might genuinely be struggling with, I don't understand how to set up my UI in a way that it has access to the data of my game. But they won't say that. They'll say, hey, how do I implement MVC in Unity, the model view controller pattern? Well, it's like, what are you trying to solve? What's the problem? What is your, is it a mini map, or is it an inventory? Is it what are you trying to solve? What's the data? And so, I think
it's funny because I was literally just working on that yesterday. So we should talk about that. I'm actually interested to hear what your thoughts are about that. I just literally was wrestling with, it's a UI. It's kind of like an inventory UI where you're plugging in, it's dynamically generating buttons. And then I'm like, okay, well, I want to be able to set the on-click event of the buttons in such a way that they have references to things, but are not, and I need to set them dynamically. I don't know what it's going to be, right? But then I need it to be, I don't want it to be too tightly coupled, right? So I was literally just doing this yesterday with my untitled cute space game that I'm working on. So this is a topic that's near that's top of mind right now.
Yeah. Well, see, even what you just described is a very specific use case, and
Yeah.
there's no one solution for you. It sounds like maybe leveraging events would be good, because anything that's dynamic. I mean, you wouldn't want to be polling constantly on one thing. You just like have an event that you can hook into. It's like, oh, okay, when this gets triggered, I'll create a button and hook it up the way I need. But yeah, a lot of folks would just immediately just say, well, I know design patterns. I know they're super valuable. I know the bread and butter design pattern for UIs is MVC, which is really, it's more for web applications.
Right.
But
this is, I think, actually is a really, and this is maybe where we can add a little bit of value in this, is like, I think a lot of people are, and I had this experience too, of reading about a lot of these design patterns, but then trying to bring those, the content that I make, and I think most of the content that you make is focused on Unity, right? Unity has its own paradigm and kind of, Unity has its own pattern that it's architected in, right? So now we're trying to kind of layer another pattern into this existing kind of pattern landscape. It can be quite, which is why I think that sometimes people are like, oh, like you get a lot of folks who come in as developers who are like, well, in my day job, I'm a web developer. And for my web applications, using MVC all the time
MVC,
is perfect. And I'm super happy with that. So I'm going to bring that pattern into Unity, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute, like, you may have some unique considerations there. So I think that's an interesting topic as well, is how do we, translate these patterns into the kind of the Unity universe? And then also how much, some people just use Unity as a renderer, right? They're like, I just totally rewrote all the software architecture. I'm not even using components, which there are games that ship like that, commercial games, they have certain needs or a team that already knows how they want to work, and they want to just bypass the whole architecture.
And Unity is a great renderer. It really, it serves, absolutely. It does it really well.
Totally. Yeah. So that's an interesting question as well, right? It's like, how entrenched are you in your software design kind of methodology? You might just want to just kind of write from the ground up and just at the end just kind of publish to Unity's renderer and say, render this, So there's a lot of ways to go about it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something. So like, if I'm a web developer, every web application, I don't want to say every web application in the world, but any modern web application, like if you were to build .NET Core web application using their layout, or if you were to go watch any tutorial, you use MVC, right? So it makes sense to lean into that. Okay, MVC, I understand that. That makes sense. It's tried and true, tried and tested. The problem with Unity, I think right now, is that there is no tried and true. I mean, I think there's becoming one, and we could talk about that, but there's no tried and true overarching design or architectural pattern that you can lean into and say, hey, for Unity, I'm going to go ahead and use this. Now, I think what you'll hear a lot is composition over inheritance, and that's where, if you look at Unity, mono behaviors, they're components. So you want to compose your game objects, meaning every little bit of behavior has its own script, and what you do is you compose that, and that kind of leans into dots or Unity ECS, because the entity component system is an architectural design pattern where you comprise your entities of many components. So I think that's something that's sort of emerging now. And then the other thing is scriptable objects. Where it's almost like you take your data and you almost make it like a first-class citizen. And I think your latest video about enums kind of shows that off too, where it's like, hey, look, your types are going to be stored in this object, this strongly typed object, and that's going to be generated at runtime. So those are the patterns that are starting to emerge, and I think hopefully we'll see more of that, where we have more of this level 2 content. Because I think that's going to be valuable. Because like, honestly, as humans, like, we thrive on patterns, It feels like every time I start a new Unity project, I have to rethink, okay, how am I going to approach this? There's no, like with a web app, if you told me to make Twitter, we're going to make a Twitter clone, or go make a Facebook clone, or go make an Instagram clone. The first thing I would think is, okay, let me get an MVC project going. Let me get my database set up, figure out what my models are going to be. Boom. I don't have to think about anything else. And I think Unity hopefully will get to that point where it's very obvious, or maybe it will never get to that point, and maybe that's a good thing.
I mean, yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I think, to touch on a few things you said, I think that the composition over inheritance, not meaning never ever use inheritance.
Right.
Obviously, there are many cases where inheritance is useful for kind of, I would say, for maybe your most abstract classes, right? Your most,
Hmm.
or not abstract in the programming sense, right? But your kind of very foundational classes using some kind of light inheritance there. But where you get into, we have a weapon, and then there's a sword that inherits from weapon, and then
Hmm.
there's a fire sword that inherits from sword, right? I
Hmm.
feel like you are really going to um, I just feel like it's going to fall over. My experience is that and as you mentioned, with the dots paradigm coming in, it's really moving to a much more, an even more kind of atomic component model, like this kind of true entity component model,
Hmm.
than what we had in the mono behavior world, right?
Yeah.
And I think that for me, I just feel like it makes a lot more sense. And I think Unity is kind of wants you to go that way a little bit. And if you kind of just don't resist and go in that direction, that you might be a happier person.
Yeah.
There's a talk that I really love, which I'll try to find and link in chat in a moment, by Brian Bucklew, who's working on Caves of Cud, where he talks about this pattern in building roguelikes, which are very defined by like you might want to have a sword that's a fire sword and an ice sword at the same time, right? And then when you're trying to do that in inheritance, it's like
Yeah.
just instant fail, right? And he it's a couple years old, and it's not he actually did build Caves of Cud in Unity, but that's an example of a game where it's like it's really just a huge C# engine, and then Unity just kind of displays it, right?
Right. Right. That's like a
But it's a,
level 3 topic.
yeah, it is. But it's honestly, for me, I
But
remember when I
yeah.
watched it, I was like struggling with some of this stuff, and it kind of just. And I'm in a lot of cases you don't need to go as far of that kind of atomic granularity, but
Hmm.
just thinking, oh, okay, I probably don't want to build a huge tree of inheritance in Unity.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
good, that was like, okay, because you get, people are very dogmatic about all these things, and they're like, oh, no, 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 you have to inherit from this, and you have to have a bunch of subclasses, otherwise it's
Yeah.
unclean or something, and it's
Yeah.
like kind of getting permission not to do that for me was like a
Yeah, I
big
mean, it's
leap
like there's
forward.
there's a grain of truth to it. Like, there's a grain of truth to saying, hey, MVC is a great pattern to use for UIs. It's just not a great pattern to use in Unity. So
Yeah.
like people, but you're right, people get dogmatic. So I guess bringing this back, there's this hole where I think a lot of folks are kind of maturing, and it's interesting to see that the whole community of Unity users and developers are actually maturing together at the same time, which is why I think now you see a lot of these level two is what we've been calling them now, these level two content creators. Not I almost wouldn't even say that they're emerging. Like for me, I've been doing this for I think 3 years now, and and I think a lot of the creators who are level two have also been doing it for about that amount of time. But as the community matures and starts to use Unity more and more, and finally says, okay, listen, I'm graduating beyond following tutorials to do things like make a mini map or make a UI,
Yeah.
an inventory for a very specific use case. They're like, well, I want to make a mini map for my game. I want to make an inventory for
Yeah.
my game, but my game has very different and unique requirements. So I think bringing it back, there's got to be some fundamental. I think there's some fundamental truths about Unity, and I think also game development that will eventually be the guiding factors into where we land as far as how do you approach game development. And I think one of those obviously is composition.
Yeah.
And I was going to say that I think the reason that is because I think game development specifically is one industry or practice or whatever that really requires good tooling, because to make a game, and I think this is something that I haven't really seen it. So for me to say, like, I think it gets lost on a lot of people, I don't think that's a fair statement, but I just haven't really seen, I've been the only person that I've heard who've touted this. But when you make a game, like for instance, let's take Skyrim, for example. When
Yeah.
you have Skyrim and the company, I think Bethesda or whatever company is developing that game, the coding aspect of it is like, I would say, a smaller portion than the content creation. You know, if you if you say I want to add a new weapon, no one's opening up their code editor to add a weapon to Skyrim. They're adding it to some tool that some developer created internally that says, hey, look, if you're going to add weapons and content, you have to open
they're probably adding it to a spreadsheet, you know.
Could be, yeah.
Like a lot, once you get to these bigger games where there's a huge mega database of items or spells or whatever, a lot of it is just done in, you see people using Google Sheets, you see people using Excel, right? Or it could just be a huge JSON file.
Yeah.
But I think that, and honestly, I think that it's funny because just working on my cute space game, this is like exactly the stuff I'm wrestling with right now, is just building, like, because it's basically like an Animal Crossing like, and so I want to have a huge database of items, right? And so I'm trying to think ahead and not make terrible mistakes now, you know, and make content authoring something that is, you know, not frictionless, but not like, that I literally have to go in and edit the source to add content, right? And I think that's actually where the scriptable object approach.
I was just going to say your enums example was a perfect example. Why you're going to have to open up your code editor every time you have to add a new type? Why not enable what I would call a game designer to come in and design the game?
Totally. Yeah. And I think there's an interesting one there, because I've had conversations with other dev friends where they're like, that pattern is good if you have a game designer who's a non-programmer, but me, myself, I just want to write everything in code. And I think that is a matter of taste, right? Like, you may just prefer, you're just like, well, it's just me. I'm just going to type everything into Visual Studio. It's fine, right? But I think for me, I'm a bad programmer, right? So I know that, right? I've accepted that.
That's good.
Myself, right?
That's good to say that. You know, it's good.
I think
for people
I talk
to
about the Dunning-Kruger curve.
Yeah,
right? I'm like down here, right? Like, past the point of thinking that I'm good. I know I'm not good. You know, like,
that's a healthy place to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that I need to, like, defend myself from myself, right? Like, just.
What's that famous philosophical quote? The more I know, the more I realize I don't know. I mean, that's where I'm at. I'm like, I guess I'm like, as a professional software developer, I am so acutely aware that there's so much that I do not know and will never know.
And I feel like that's the start of wisdom, right? You're like, okay, I know that I don't know. I'm not going to be arrogant and, like, assume that I'm a genius and I'm going to always do genius things, right? Like, I know that most of the time I'm an idiot, right? I feel like this is one of the things that, on, like, a philosophical level, that programming teaches you, right? It's like, it's always your fault. You're always the idiot who, like, who failed to check if this was null or whatever it is and crash your application, right? Like, it's always you who made the mistake. It's not the compiler. It's not a compiler error. It's not the IDE.
You are the one human element in there.
Yeah, you're the single point of failure that's always wrong, you know. So having kind of had my face rubbed in that for a couple of years, I feel like building systems that minimize me breaking things, and that where I have less and less chances to come in and break things is good, you know.
For sure.
And kind of, so there's, like, designer me, and then there's developer me. And designer me just wants to be able to go in and plug in objects and move things around and you know, edit, whether it's editing a text file or a spreadsheet or something, and just do that in a way that's more frictionless, but not be introducing a ton of bugs and breaking all my other systems because I forgot 2 years ago that I programmed this other thing. I mean, because that happens, right? If you're working, especially indie scale develop. I mean, I think another thing that's interesting to talk about, right, is is the scale of development. The patterns are going to be really different, right? Like
Yeah.
at indie scale development, where it's like me by myself,
Yeah.
I'm kind of fighting against me from 2 years ago, or like defending against me from 2 years ago, more than I'm like trying to defend against other programmers on my team, you
Yeah.
know, overwriting my public fields or whatever it is. Like I'm, you know, because that's a lot of the time, right? They're like, you need to make your class protected and make everything private because some other programmer on your team is going to come in and write to those fields and break everything, right? Well, it's like, well, I'm the idiot in that case, right? And I just don't remember that 2 years ago I wrote all this code and
Yeah.
you know now I'm doing bad things to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Volker also says something pretty funny. I hit the point where I noticed that I over-engineer too much like half a year ago, and that's a great thing to know. I mean, I remember when I first realized that I over-engineer things, and unfortunately, it came on the job, and I had to come from a coworker who had to, you know, a mentor of mine who
Yeah.
had to take me aside and say, "Listen, I understand that you're." Because look, it's fun to code. It's fun to just open up and think. It's a puzzle, you know. Like it's like solving a puzzle. It really can be fun to think about things and even like design patterns. Like, oh, how am I going to implement this? And how can I like play a little bit of code golf? How can I design this in the most efficient way possible? That stuff is fun, but it's just if your goal is to put something out and complete something, you know, you just can't do it. And unfortunately, even it very seldom provides any a return on interest, the appropriate return on interest, the value that you'd expect to get from it. I even saw in the chat, let's see if I can find it real quick. Someone had mentioned like it's the argument's architecture versus performance. Oh, Vakarol again. In the context of Unity, there's also performance or architecture, performance versus architecture. But if you think about it, I mean, even with Unity ECS, when are you ever really going to need that level of performance unless you're like doing something where you literally have thousands of NPCs running across a field? Like, but when do you do that, you know?
Well, I mean, so I think I love this topic, the conflict between performance and architecture, right? And especially in the context of Unity and yeah, talking about something like ECS, I think that you know, you have that whatever it is, premature optimization is the root of all evil, or you know, I'm misquoting, but you know, the I think that's a really key kind of thought there, because my overall advice for folks, especially if folks are, I mean, I know some people are just like learning ECS for fun, and they're just like, oh,
sure, yeah, it's good to have in your tool belt. It's good to have.
Yeah, that's all good, right? But I think that the saying, oh, I'm going to go in and I'm going to write all my UI and menus and animation and everything all in ECS.
Really lean into it.
Now, it's like, I think that you don't need to do that, right? If it's the menu, if it's the main menu of the game, unless there's some gnarly simulation going on behind it, you don't need it, right? Just use mono behavior.
Like a space sim or something.
Yeah, and there's like a 10,000 ship battle happening behind the main menu, maybe, right? But other than that, right, it's and you should probably just render that to a movie, right? Because it's not interactive.
For real, yeah. Just cheat. Really, I mean, that's what game development's
right? Like the best code is no code, right? Like, I think that my kind of advice to anybody thinking about those kind of architecture versus optimization questions is like, first write it the low performance way, right? First write it in the way that is as clean as possible, as easy to maintain as possible, as easy to extend as possible. And then when you hit that point, I mean, obviously within reason and season to taste, and it depends, all those caveats, right? But when you hit that point where you're like, okay, now we're actually really seeing the cost, that's the moment when you go in and you're like, okay, we need to actually take this piece that's in the hot path of the code and that's running every frame, and now we need to do some gnarly mega optimization on it and dig deep into it, right? But doing that before you actually see that frame rate drop, you know, I think is a super bad idea. And, you know, I mean, obviously you can think ahead, right? And you know, oh, okay.
That's what I was going to say. Like maybe this is a level 3 topic, but coming from working I work at a software company. You know, when a task comes to me, I'm the guy who actually architects like things at a high level in my company. Like I talk to the customer, you know, I do demonstrations, and I bring back to the development team, hey, here's what we're going to write. Here's what we're going to code. But I don't walk into their office and say, "Hey guys, we need a feature that does this, this, and that." No, I write a technical document. I spec it out. I create
Yeah.
tickets. I think of the technology that we're going to use, and I instruct my team on, "Hey, we're going to use this technology." If it was a mobile app that did something, I'd say, "Hey, we're going to use Xamarin on this project. We're going to store it over here. Here are the
Yeah.
requirements of this project." At that point, I know what optimizations I need. And so this is a topic that I've actually wanted to start covering on the channel is planning your projects. Because speaking from experience,
Yeah.
when I come in and sit down to Unity, the last thing I want to do is plan. I have some vague idea for a game, like, oh, I want to make like an escape room game. I don't even
Yeah.
think about the puzzles. I just sit down at Unity and I just start dragging things around. And, you know, it's like, but realistically, the first thing I should be doing is whiteboarding my ideas, thinking of what the exact puzzles are going to be, and then if going so far to if it were my day job, I'd write a business requirements document that would outline what the specification of the project is, why I'm doing it, and it would bring me to the point where I would say, do I need ECS? Does this project need any optimization? I'm escaping from one room, you know? Do I really need...
Exactly. You're not going to have 10,000 rooms.
There's not going to be 10,000 puzzles. There's not really going to be anything going on unless I have some really complicated puzzle that requires like an in-memory like object tree that's really complicated.
Yeah.
I don't need it, you know? So
it's not going to happen. Yeah. I think that's right. And I think it's also interesting, like the concept of like speccing and requirements and planning coming from a business application or a website to a game, right? I think that the thing that a lot of us are wrestling with in game development is finding the fun, right? You start with an idea of like, I think it's going to be fun to have an escape room where you have to do these puzzles, and then you start to do it. You prototype it and you start to play with it. And you're like, oh God, this is just a lot of clicking and it's really boring.
Yeah,
and
it's not fun.
I don't want to click 100 times on all these things, right?
Yeah.
And it's not fun. And then you're like, oh, okay, shoot, I gotta think about, maybe there needs to be something else in here, or so there's that iterative, there's that iteration loop that I think, resists that kind of superstructured planning. And I think that's, I know it kind of, there's a lot of people who talk about, ideas of like MVP or agile versus waterfall. And I think in games, there's an interesting conversation to be had there. But I think that I think there are some things where it also depends, and I think this is maybe interesting to talk about as well. And actually, one of the reasons why I'm now the kind of prototype project or game project that I just started working on, I'm very self-consciously trying to clone something, kind of, like I'm saying, okay, this is like basically a lot like Animal Crossing, right? And what that helps me with then is I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to need a big database of items. I know I'm going to need certain things. I know I'm going to need this and that UI, and there are certain things that I know I'm going to need, and it kind of limits the wild possibility space. Whereas
100%.
One of my previous big games, or the last project that I worked for a long time on and that failed, was I was trying to be, in my mind anyway, so original and combine all these ideas that I had never seen put together. The problem was I had never seen them put together, right? I actually didn't know what the hell it did. It was really problematic, actually. So I think that might be to kind of pull that into a piece of advice for folks, people looking for advice, maybe not just on your first prototype, but maybe when you're thinking about making your first larger project. It's like, don't be afraid to copy something, like or to work in a genre, right? And obviously there's going to be plenty of room to be creative, and maybe I get to a point where I'm like, oh, okay, actually we're going to throw out all the Animal Crossing stuff and it's going to turn into something else. But I think that,
I have a great book.
North Star.
I have a great book for this sort of thing. Steal like an artist, man. That is like all art is stolen in some way, and
totally.
It's not just. And obviously, that that sounds like an extreme title, clickbaity title, but the idea is, it's a shared language. You know what I mean? Like if I'm a graphic designer or if I'm a graphic artist and I say, hey, what do you create? Well, I create pixel art. Well, pixel art, you didn't create pixel art. You didn't come up with that. You stole that from something else, and the same with games. It helps that shared language. If you say I'm making an Animal Crossing style game, I know what that means. I think the big buzzword a long time ago was I'm making a roguelike. Okay, everyone knows what a roguelike is, but I think that's healthy. It's like, yeah, sure, make a roguelike. The genre is well established, so you should be able to focus on what's going to make your roguelike unique.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, and also you can, like in my last game, I had this whole problem with how it was like a flying game and how the input would work, where there was like a cursor, but it would steer the player, but you also were trying to aim with it. And I really struggled to find anything to take inspiration or copy from, right? I eventually ended up kind of copying from Star Fox, partly, right? But it being able to have, like if you're making an FPS, everybody knows how shooting and moving in an FPS basically should feel, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably like, and this is the thing that I think a lot of people don't get, and I definitely didn't get as a beginner, is like, making anything is super hard, right? Like super hard, right?
Creating anything is
just literally just doing anything, right? So don't make it 10 times harder for yourself by being like, I'm going to make something the world has never ever seen. It's a game you control with your thoughts, and I'm going to invent the interface hardware, and I'm going to, it's like you will fail. Like,
it's interesting. There's that coming up with a completely, I guess you could say, original idea, which there are no original ideas. They're just, you've mashed together a bunch of disparaging ideas into something that seems original. And the other thing is scope. And scope is something like, if I said, I'm gonna create something like Skyrim, or the other example that we like to say on this channel is an MMO, because I constantly tell people stop saying you're gonna make an MMO, because the scope of an MMO, while it's very simple, it's very connect to a server, and we're in the same world, and I can do quests. Okay, fine, sure. I give you that. That's not that complicated. Once you get past the multiplayer, maybe you're using Photon or something, it isn't that hard.
Honestly, though, just the networking piece. As soon as you add networking, there's so much noise.
Sure.
States. It's like, please do not.
But let's pretend that the tooling out there, the frameworks make it easy. Yeah. So you've got that. Well, what about the content? There's so much content. There's a world. There's quests, items. There's just. It's insane. Like how, So Tron's like talking shit.
How dare you? I mean, I'll tell you, like my MMO advice, this is actually stolen from my friend Adam Buckner, who used to work with me at Unity, that we would get people coming into the Unity forums with exactly that. I'm going to make an MMO. And like, they have like some kind of, they're like, I'm going to use Photon for networking, or nowadays they would probably be using, Improbable, right? Or
Spatial OS. Yeah.
Spatial OS, like they'll be like, I've got this off the shelf tool and that other one, and I'm going to put them together, and they're free, and I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to do this. And it's like, okay, fine. So look at something like World of Warcraft, right? Literally just look at the icons in World of Warcraft, right? All the icons, like the icon, even just limit it to the icons for the abilities for all the different player classes, right? How fast can you draw an icon? Let's say it takes you an hour, right? And then you just start to multiply, and you're like, oh, okay, there's 400 icons. Okay, so it's going to take me 10 weeks to do the icons. And now you're starting to get the idea, like, wait a minute.
Yeah, the scope, the scope. And then there's scope creep, which is when you think, oh, I should add this feature too. Ooh, wouldn't it be cool if it did this too? That's another why I'm a huge advocate for planning ahead. And I'm still working on a way to make that something I could that's easy to digest, because I feel like if I start putting videos about that now, people are going to be like, really, dude? You're going to make me write a business specification document for my game? And look, I won't even go into that right now, because that's going to take us down a rabbit hole. Why?
Well, I mean, I do think, though, that sharing that information, I mean, you don't have to tell people to do it, but sharing how you would do it or how you would think about it. First of all, it's provocative, right? A lot of people disagree and there'll be an interesting conversation, right? But I think it is, for someone like me, I don't come from that background of, I've never done that, right? I've never scoped a business application through that kind of structured process. So it's interesting content for me. You know, I might not do it, but like it might give me at least a way to think about what I'm doing and some of the patterns to go down. We had a super chat from Dajo Code. The question is, I'm a senior in high school. I'm a level 2 programmer.
Oh yeah.
It's so funny that now this is like going to become a meme.
Thanks for that super chat, by the way.
What's the level 2 programming? Yeah, thanks for supporting the channel. And then any suggestions for classes next year? No suggestions for classes next year, but what are your thoughts on majoring in computer science? I think that if you feel inspired to do it and you're interested, first of all, what I'll say is you don't need to do it to work in games. You don't even need to go to college to work in games. Maybe a controversial opinion, right? But
I think it's a fair statement.
I've been in the hiring chair working for companies like Unity. I don't give a beep what degrees you have. I really don't. What I care about is the work that you've shipped, right? What work have you published? What have you done? And I'm not necessarily your hobby project that you didn't finish that's sitting in a GitHub repo, right? I want to see what have you shipped, right? Whether it's content that you've published or a game that you shipped, or what have you actually made and finished? And is it real? Is it viable, right? And obviously if you're 18, right, I'm going to filter through that lens but that's what I respect. Not a degree, not even, honestly, work history even, because some people work at companies for years and are terrible. I really want to see output and results, right? And that's what I used to hire people based on. And I hired people who didn't have college degrees, but were doing great stuff. And I could see that the stuff was great. And I'm like, yeah, you're hired, you know? So that point, but I think in terms of majoring in CS, it's good because it's a very marketable skill. And if you're going to go to college, it's a good thing to major in because it's marketable. Also, I feel like it's worth warning people about game development in general as a job, as it can be brutal as a job, right? It's not an easy industry to make a living in. There's a lot of bad work practices. There's a lot of bad work practices. You generally will get paid less in game development than you will working and making commercial software. And so it's kind of one of those things, like if you can avoid it, don't do it, right? Some of us are so, you know, in love with the idea that we make the necessary sacrifices and do it, or we you know, do funny stuff and figure out how to make it work, right? But I think that's you know, just in terms of like real talk, it's good to say like, hey, don't think that this is easy. It really is like trying to win the Olympics, right? To like be a you know, top tier game developer. Like it's super competitive. Lots of people want to do it. And you got to really be really good and work really hard. But that being said, if you get a CS degree, if you work for 3-4 years in the games business and you're like, oh, I hate this, you can go work for a bank and make a lot of money with your CS degree, right?
It'll definitely enable you to be able to pull in capital in another way. It'll give you more flexibility as well. I mean, and truly, like if you don't like programming, I mean, you're a level 2 programmer, so it seems like you like it. If you don't like programming, I wouldn't recommend anyone get a CS degree just because they think it'll help their game development career, for sure. Definitely not a good idea. But if you do like programming, you have an affinity for it, and you've been working on your skills, and you can afford to go to college, I think a CS degree is a great idea if you want. I mean, you'll don't
go into debt. Don't go into debt to go to college.
I know.
This is like getting into politics, but
I'm still paying off my college debt. I mean, I'm 31. I'm still paying it off.
I mean, and you're a software developer, right? So it's not like you're working at McDonald's, right? That's a big deal, right? I would say figure out what you can. I don't know. That's not the week. So we're gonna get into a whole.
This is a good time to say, hey, Roman Papush, what's going on, man? Another content creator. I'm loving this. This is something I love that our creators are getting together. Matt and I talked about this a lot. We really want to start banding together as content creators to provide that sort of level 2 stuff. And I don't know, just just trying to figure out the path, you know, and I really do see it over my years of being a content creator and being in the Unity community space. I've seen that the entire community is growing. It's almost like we're like one big cohort that's all growing and learning together.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, we have a contest going on, a giveaway during the stream. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. All you got to do to enter is go to that link, fill out the form. We already have a bunch of entrants. And what we're going to do is at the end of the stream, we're going to give away a voucher for Rainbow Folders 2. So I did a tutorial on that, or rather I did a video on that. Was it this week? I think it was this Sunday's video was Rainbow Folders 2. So go ahead and check that out, and we'll be giving out a voucher for that. So cool, man. This is great. I'm loving this conversation. This is what I like to talk about. Programming
Definitely. No, I think it's super fun. And yeah, definitely shout out to Roman. If you guys don't know Roman, his content is really great. He's been posting content about this kind of first-person Bomberman game that he's making that is super sick and inspiring. So, and he's also got a great golf game that he's been working on for a while. So I recommend you guys check him out, check out his channel. But yeah, I think, you know, and I think your point about one of the things I definitely want to see, and it was part of what I was involved in my work at Unity, working with a woman called Elena Nizhnik there, who's kind of there in charge of the kind of content creator community. But I think that there's a ton of great Unity content creators who are a little bit off on their own island for whatever reason. And I that's definitely something I want to, now with the new channel that we're working on, the 1000 Ant channel, I want to try to focus on that, right? Bringing people together. And I think you've been doing some great stuff with this on your channel as well. It's, you know, game dev, there's an interesting match between the whole rise of indie dev as a kind of a meme, as a kind of an idea, right? Where people are like, I'm going to work by myself or with like one friend and ship a commercial game. And I think that's kind of, it appeals to a lot of people who are kind of introverted and like to stay in their room, right? Myself included, right? Like,
Me too.
You know, it's,
Total
I'm
introvert.
super happy being in my room, just programming for hours, not talking to anybody. But I do also think that it's important to know that for a lot of us, a lot of the games that inspire people to get into game dev and are the most beloved games are made by teams and sometimes by big teams, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You know, going it alone, there are strengths and values to that, right? But it's definitely not the only approach. And I think getting people together, there's a lot of power in that as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so much empowerment, and you know, it's hard. I'm speaking from experience because one of my many hats at my current company is I'm the manager of our development team, and there's a lot. It's hard. It's very hard because there's issues of articulating what you want. There's issues of working together on the same project, both logistically and fundamentally. I mean, there are philosophical differences that programmers have. There are approaches that people disagree with. You know, if I was working on a big team and someone was touting that we do a UI using MVC and I didn't think that was appropriate, then we'd have a problem there. We'd have some sort of, even if even if I had to say, hey, I don't think that's a good idea, that's still a confrontation, as small as that might be. So it is very scary and hard to work with people. But man,
I mean, that's important. And I think that getting, at the same time, it's also a skill, right, that you can develop and get good at, right?
Definitely a skill. Yeah.
So I think that but it's true, right? And just like, because I've also done like managing work, you know, and that's a whole other thing. That's a skill in and of itself, and it's not easy, right? And getting egos and feelings and human emotions and people's philosophical ideas about what code we should write, and I mean, it's real. It's real.
How to name things, naming conventions. Do you put M underscore before let's do it.
Let's argue about Hungarian notation. I'm team anti Hungarian notation. The whole M underscore thing, I do not like it. Maybe that's just the way I learn.
It's garbage. It's objectively crap. Don't ever put it's object and never put the word int into the. We know it's an int, man.
Period.
You don't have to put int health. I get it. I can read.
Bro, I really, the whole M underscore thing, I just hate it. I feel like, let's talk about naming variables. Here's my thing about naming variables. Maybe to the point of being annoying, but I like really long variable names, right? Like I'm
verbose.
Verbose. Yeah. I mean, not like really, not pointlessly long, right? But I would much rather have a variable name that's a little bit longer. That ideally, if it's like an object type, that it's literally just the name of the object type, you know, with a lowercase letter at the beginning of it, so that I know what it actually is, so that they match. And then, like, I also don't worry about screen real estate, right? I'd rather have my code like a 3-line class, like scroll off the screen, than to be all compact and you know, be less easy to read and understand. That's my. And I'm right, and everybody else is wrong. That's my personal, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree. What's funny is that I before I ever became a programmer, I went through a lot of different paths, which it's helped me. Like when I was in high school, when I was, you know, Dajo Code's age, I was getting ready to go to the Art Institute and become a graphic designer. I was really into art in high school, and I, you know, wanted to take that path. And then after that, I decided, for whatever reason, that I wanted to be an English major, and I wanted to be a high school English teacher. I don't know why that was my goal at my first years of college, but I became an English major. So I spent many years learning art and graphic design. Then I spent a couple years learning everything I could about grammar and English and writing. And then for some reason I was like, I think I'm better at programming, because I think I always did programming as a hobby. I think what it was, not to get too deep, is like I never thought I could be a programmer. Like I just didn't think I was smart enough. I didn't think I was bad at math. Like being an artist and an English person, I was like, I can't be a programmer. But I always loved it.
No, I love this topic. I think it's a great topic, and I think that here's controversial opinion. I think programming is more like writing than it is like math.
Well, that's the point I was going to make. My English degree. And all that time I spent has helped me so much in my programming career, because, you know, obviously naming things, I'm very keen on getting, you know, being able to name things in the most, with as much brevity as possible, but with most clear. And I'm also really good, for whatever reason, as you know, because I write tutorials, at articulating technical topics, you know, to the layman, if you will, which is why I have a certain the position that I do in my company now, where I talk to the customer. So it's interesting, but programming has I feel like I never use math in programming. And when I do, I just Google it.
Yeah, exactly. Or, I mean, you know, okay, this is a fun topic, especially like for beginners and stuff. I think that all this algorithm whiteboarding stuff, nobody ever uses this. All this like big O notation, all this stuff, like I've literally never seen it. You know what I mean? Like it's just, of course, if you're interested, you want to learn that stuff, it's good, right? But people doing these like whiteboard interviews where they're like, solve this obscure algorithm problem. It's like, this literally does not come up in daily work. And then we have something called Google, and also books, right? If we really need this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's maybe, I'm kind of stating it in like a polemical, extreme way, right? It's obviously there's value to knowing this stuff, but I think that the reason I kind of push it to the extreme is because a lot of people will be like, oh, no, I don't understand, you know, all these algorithms, therefore I can't go do this work. And that's completely false, right? I think that when I started to learn programming, because I wanted to make games, and I saw programming as a kind of a necessary evil that I had to kind of grit my teeth through to be able to make the things I wanted to make and express myself creatively in the medium of games, right? And I was like, well, I know I'm not going to be able to like get somebody else to do the programming. I'm going to have to be able to do it myself.
Yeah.
And so I think that but what I discovered was that I actually love programming. It's
Yeah.
actually super interesting and fun. Yeah, it's like kind of puzzles and creative and building these kind of imaginary castles. Like I get super into it. And I've discovered that actually when I get to sit and program for 8 hours, it's like my happiest.
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
so
It's fun.
focused.
It's definitely fun.
Yeah,
That's
it's
why
like
people tend to over-engineer things. It's just fun to think about it.
yeah,
It's
and to
it's
build
a
cool
yeah.
systems and
To really go just like separate things and like and honestly, I call that doodling, by the way.
yeah,
Because and I always say give yourself the time to doodle, right? If your work, I want to make that clear because I always say, like, listen, if you're working on a project and you have a game or something you're trying to complete, as someone who has to complete programming tasks every day and is on the clock, I don't have the luxury of doodling. I have to
yeah,
get it done and I have to make compromises all the time about the quality of my code.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
but
and I think
yeah,
that's really important, right? Just being
yeah,
production oriented.
yes,
People really don't get that, right? Of course,
hmm
we could hyper optimize and hyper clean everything and make it beautiful and polish it. But it's like a lot of time we just need to ship today. Like we have to ship today.
yeah, yeah,
The money's about to run out. We've already spent 2 weeks on the program. We need to ship, and
yeah,
and that's super valid, right?
yeah.
Like that's a good reason to ship. Because it's like we're doing this for a living, and we can't sit here for 6 weeks. You
Yeah.
know,
And I used to
fooling
be
around.
bitter about that. I used to be like, I had to put this crappy code out. But like, at the end of the day, if, so, and unfortunately, I'm speaking in business terms.
Yeah,
So, but this can be, translated to game development. But like at the end of the
yeah,
day, what I have produced provides value to the customer, and I see that, because I do interact with our customers for my company, and so I mean, I am the guy who takes the feature that the dev team created that we worked
right.
on and had all those compromises in it where it was like, oh, we should probably write it this way, but we don't, they need it by this, whatever, by the end of this sprint. I take that to the customer and they're like, oh, wow, this is great. This is exactly what we need. And it's like, well, what can I say? I provided them value, The
Yeah.
code maybe isn't the best and maybe isn't the most optimized, but hey, they don't seem to be complaining about it running too
Yeah,
slowly or anything like
exactly.
that.
If somebody's going to click the button once every 30 seconds, it doesn't matter if it
Yeah,
takes 250
exactly.
milliseconds or 500, right? Like
Yeah.
it's I think that's really important. And also I think that one of the things that I kind of use to comfort myself when I feel like I have to just kind of hack something in my code is if you look at two examples. One is you can find this online. The team from Celeste, which was a popular
Mm.
game that sold well, right, and that I would say is a good game, right? They shipped their platformer controller. They published their platformer controller code, right?
Yeah.
Which is literally just one huge
It's the
class
worst.
with all this crazy stuff in it, right? And see, that's an that I think a lot of us, from a kind of programming code smell, programming aesthetics perspective, would be like, oh, whoa, this is gross, right? But they shipped a good game, and the
Yeah.
players love it. They made money. They're going to make another game. It worked, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't actually. They're not shipping the code. They're shipping the feature, right? And the feature worked and was good, right? So I think that that's important. And then another great example is Thomas Was Alone by Mike Bithell, which is like a platformer from a couple of years ago that was a kind of an indie hit where it's like these little squares. And it was like it was a good game. A lot of people liked it, and he shipped it and made money and was able to start a company off it and whatever. And I forget where I saw this, it was maybe a GDC talk or something, but he was talking about like that code was garbage. Like literally, he was just starting. I think he was a game designer, doing all the programming by himself. So it was all just like, just real bad code. But he shipped. The game worked.
Yeah.
It's like, so I feel like there's obviously we all want to find ourselves on the right place on this continuum. And I'm not just saying just forget it, just ship trash code all the time.
Right.
But code that runs and does what the user wants and doesn't crash, like.
Well, here's a valid point, because here's the most valid argument I ever hear when someone says, I don't need to architect my game, or that Celeste code is fine. Here's this is a valid argument. This is something I actually agree with. Most games don't need to be maintained. The game Thomas Was Alone, he wrote it, he shipped it, it's gone. He'll never look at the code again. Animal Crossing, they have to patch it, they have to update it, they have to fix things, they have to release content. That code probably has to look real good. Or World of Warcraft or any MMO, that code needs to be maintained. So from a business standpoint, the product that I work on at my company, that product has been around for 10 years. And that is 10-year-old code, you know, like that needs to be good. It needs to be something that we can maintain and scale. A game that you're going to drop on, you know, on the Steam and never look at again. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to have the best code. I agree with that. I can definitely.
No. I think. I mean, and also to be clear, right? I'm not advocating for bad code.
Right.
I'm just saying like that. You know, try to articulate it. I'm advocating for a pragmatic approach.
I like
which
that.
Prioritizes shipping, right?
Yeah.
Shipping is what matters, and shipping comes first, right?
Yeah.
If we have time to make everything clean and beautiful and sweep all the sawdust off the floor, of course we want to do that, right? That's because the truth is, really, as developers, that's for us, right? That's to make our life better, that we're not living in a dirty environment with a bunch of candy wrappers on the floor, right? It's like we want to, which is, you know, it's a lot of code bases are like that, right? They're like, oh, I was up to 4 a.m. and I just punch a hole through the wall, run the cables through the wall, just ship, you know, it's like, it can get ugly, right? But I think that on the other extreme, and this is maybe more for the kind of like people who get super obsessed about design patterns and architecture, it's possible to get so wrapped up in that and not ship. Right, which I think is the wrong extreme, right? And obviously, you want to find the perfect spot in the middle on that continuum. But I think you know, that's kind of, I'm on the just ship it side if we have to choose. You know.
Well, this is why I'm also a real big advocate for planning, because, and again, I see this in my day job, and I've been working on the same application for 10 years at that day job. Is that if you plan ahead and a feature is well defined. Let me frame it the other way. If I'm working on a feature and I'm thinking about how I'm going to implement it, but then my manager comes in and says, "Oh, by the way, it also needs to do this," and you're like, "Oh God, I didn't really consider that." Okay, let me see if I can do that. All right, and then next to the manager says, "Oh, by the way, we talked to the customer and they actually want to do this as well," and you're like, "Well, that has nothing to do with the first thing." Scope creep always leads to bad code. I will say that from experience. Scope creep.
No, that's true.
Feature creep
like,
always. Just make it happen. They need this. They like this.
Right? Just make everything public. Like,
yeah. You're like, shoot, I'll just do that. I'll make it a singleton, whatever, man. The guy wants me to do it.
Just do it. It's by tomorrow. Just do it.
And so if you're working on, like, if I'm taking back to my escape room example, if I'm making an escape room and all of a sudden I'm like, be kind of cool if it was like a first person shooter too. It's like, okay, well, now I got to implement health, and I gotta tack on weapons. He's got to have an inventory. He's got to have ammo. It's like, how do I? Well, I'll just put it in, you know. And they're like, oh, but we like it if, you know, he had a portal gun. It's like, oh my god. Okay, well, you know, I get it. That'd be fun, but you know, you know, the first thing we had was fun too. So why do we have to add all these other features?
I know. No, I think that's a good point, and it's true that if you never had a concept of it in your original kind of design, it could get really ugly, right? And that is, you know, that definitely supports planning. And I mean, look, in a perfect world, we all, you know, will follow good practices. And I think even just knowing what good practices are will prevent you from doing really horrible things, right? Like, or it's like just kind of like it's the platonic ideal, right? It's like, we know that this is, you know, this is what we're aiming for, and we know we're never going to get there, right? We're never going to ship perfect code, but this is kind of where we want to get to, and we're not going to just go in the opposite direction if we can avoid it, you know?
Yeah. It's almost like an awareness of your imperfect code. Like, here are the compromises that I made, and I'm aware of them and I accept it, as opposed to, I was adding a bunch of features. I had to shoehorn this in. I threw a singleton in there somewhere. I know that I made a bunch of variables public. I don't really know. Like it's like the purposefulness, I think, that is, important. When you make these compromises and you do it in a purposeful way, you can sleep at night, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's right. You're making a choice with more of an awareness of the consequences, right? Or you're making a trade-off, right? It's your eyes just making fun of you wearing a hat in the house.
You want to know why? It's because I have
the hair.
Thanks to the quarantine, I have not been able to get a haircut.
Bro.
And do you really want to look at this? Look at this. This is terrible.
Dude, my girlfriend actually cut my hair for me.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I think if you look really closely at it, you'll see there's a bunch of little hair sticking out. But honestly, she did a really good job. So shout out.
I might let my wife cut my hair this weekend. It's getting to a point.
Give it a try. And I said to her, I was like, listen, if it really goes terribly wrong, I'll just shave it off, which is not a good look for me. I've done it before.
I've done it before too. Not a great look.
I have like a moon head, so it's really bad. But
that's funny.
She really did good. We did it with a beard trimmer. Just crazy.
Ooh.
Beard trimmer and the scissors. And just like,
oh man. In Sunday's video, I'm wearing a hat. It's like the first video I ever wear like a hat on. Both Barles and Charles are wearing hats in that one.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I know. Hey man, we're out here. We're the show must go on.
It's like, yeah, exactly. The show must go on. My hair is really hard to deal with. Like when I was in high school, I had it down to my shoulders. It was like I look like a lion, like it grows out. It's very thick and curly. That's
amazing.
Oh, that's funny. Man.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think also one of the points I wanted to grab on that you made earlier, that we kind of jumped past, but talking about your history of going from graphic design to English to programming, I feel like this is something that is good for people to hear, especially younger people. I went through a really similar progression where I was, when I was a young teenager, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I learned a bunch of stuff about that. I actually went to film school for part of my university, and then I got into doing music, and then I had some little success with that, and then I was like an underground musician for 15 years, and had a whole career, never made any money or got famous or anything, but made a lot of albums and toured around and had a lot of fun. And then I got into, and then I started teaching through that. And then I, got into YouTube through that. And then I got into game development. And what happens that you'll find is that all of these things that you've been doing, all of these weird, I like to think of it as a kind of a spiral, right? Yeah. All these weird things that you do, when you get to the kind of next turn of the spiral, you realize, oh, you know what? Like, being a music teacher, I learned how to make YouTube videos.
Yep.
Now that was actually the thing that ended up getting me hired at Unity. I got hired at Unity. I wasn't a good Unity developer at that time. I was really bad, actually. Like I was like, 0.1 level 0.1 Unity developer, But they had programmers on the team. They're like, okay, it's okay. Like, we'll help you. We'll review your code and stuff. And that was a great learning experience for me. But the fact that I had this weird mix of skills, I knew a little bit of Unity, I knew a little bit of YouTube, I knew, teaching and content creation, all that stuff. And then that all came together and ended up, allowing me to do that and kind of take the next step into my career. I think that that's really important for people to know. And you don't know what you're going to be doing in 5 years or 10 years, like I'm 40 now. I've been working for, I started working when I was really young. I've been working now for 25 years, and I've done all kinds of stuff. And the truth is that each time I go to the next thing, there's some new, I'm like, oh, it was so good. I learned video editing. I've been doing video editing like through every stage of my career. It turns out to be a really valuable skill for me. And, but I might have looked at it and be like, oh, it's a waste. Why did I waste all that time learning filmmaking and video editing, right? It's like, no,
nothing's a waste.
Really valuable,
it all informs everything else. And so the Joe Code, you say you feel weird wanting to do programming straight out the bat. To some extent, I wish I kind of had done programming straight out the bat. I wish I had that confidence. I don't regret the things that I did, but just because you choose to do programming doesn't mean you can't do all the other things. Even to this day, I enjoy reading books about writing. One of my favorite books is a book called On Writing Well. because I just like writing, and I write, you
Yeah.
know, I write all my scripts. I write all my screenplays now for Bartles and Charles. Like, I just enjoy it. It's a hobby. It really is. You know, programming is my day job, and it's also a hobby as well. Art,
Yeah.
I've just gotten into, I've done 3D modeling over the course of my life, and I love it. I'm so anal about getting the geometry just right, and like making sure I have like, I forget what they're called, not n-gons, the ones with four, whatever, you get the idea. I love it. Like,
Yeah.
I just purchased a hard surface modeling tutorial, and I've been going through it, and it's like, I'm not a 3D modeler, you know, and I never will be, but I love doing it. It's just so fun, you know? So just because you're a programmer doesn't mean you can't explore other things. I used to play the drums. I played the drums for 10 years. I played the trombone for 6. You know, just do everything, you know?
No, I think it's really good. And also I think that you know, all of it informs, they all kind of bleed over.
Yeah,
First
definitely.
of all, learning things itself is a kind of a meta skill, right? So like learning how to learn and getting good at learning new skills is in and of itself really valuable.
Learn all the things.
Yeah, I think it's really good. It makes you happy, and you never know what you're going to need. And obviously you have to figure out a way to make a living. You know, my kind of advice to people in that regard is like, just get a trade early on, right? Learn some skill that is relatively marketable. For me, for many, many years, and even now, honestly, it was making videos, right? Video editing, video production.
Yep.
I learned how to do that. And that's honestly what in weird different industries and different forms, I've been making a living with that for 20 plus years. And I think that, so having some kind of a trade or marketable skill, right? But then once you've got something and you can pay your rent and make a living, go do what you want, right? Learn all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, I'm the same. I love reading about learning weird things that I'm never going to use, but I'm just into it, you know?
Yeah,
like,
it's just great. Yeah, it's
makes me happy.
Yeah, I guess some people just have that drive to want to learn new things, and I mean, I don't know if it's a character trait or what, but yeah, learning things is great. I mean, just that, you're right, that meta idea of like, I just like learning something. Like, I get so excited to think of like, oh, I don't know anything about this, but I have the tools. You know, that's like a thing with modeling, like. I like going on Pinterest and looking up like hard surface modeling and seeing like the topology. Thank you, Vagarol. The topology, and like seeing how it's like, you see like a human face, but they've gotten it so that like the topology is perfect, and like you have like these 5 pulls all in the right place, and it's like, whoa. And then it's like, bro, Blender's free for $60. I can download a hard surface modeling course, and now I can just model whatever, you know. I like it. Like in my latest video, that thing that level, I modeled the whole thing. It looks like crap, but I had fun. I modeled it.
I mean, I think this is also the crazy. Here's where I put on my old man hat. Back in my day, you know, but like when I was learning video editing and stuff, like I would have to go and buy books, paper books.
Oh yeah,
you know
yeah,
like, there was no, or go to like a night school and pay for a course where I sat there, right?
Yeah. And the software was probably hundreds of dollars.
Yeah. I mean, this is a good one too. I had to work for free so that I could get access to the video editing equipment at night.
Oh yeah. Wow.
You know, that was how it was. Like if you wanted to really learn, I could, the machine, all the stuff was like $20,000, you know, like, and I was 18, like it wasn't going to happen. Right. So, so all of that, like now we're at this point where all the tools you need to have a little creative studio in your house are all like, you can have like a real production setup for like a couple $1,000s, including like computer, lights, camera, good audio, you know, and there's YouTube, and I mean, it's just
it's incredible. We're so lucky. I mean, really, to live in this time, and just let's get real like deep with the quarantine. I mean, in this pandemic, it stinks. You know, it's very bad. But we are so lucky that we can order food, that we can sit here. I can order Chick-fil-A and sit here on my computer and learn 3D modeling, basically for free.
No, I mean, it's really, I was saying to a friend of mine, you know, I was like, imagine if this had happened 20 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Have the internet, you know, it's like.
What happened 100 years ago, and that must have been.
Do you have books in your house? Like what VHS tapes do you have in your house to watch again and again, right? Like now we have I just started watching The
Yeah.
Mandalorian with my kids. Like, I'm like, oh, okay, go pay €7 and boom. Okay, here we go.
It's
Like
funny how just 10
hours
years,
of,
just 10,
yeah.
2010, a whole different story. It would have been like totally different.
No, yeah, exactly. Even, I mean, it's not, yeah, it's not even 20 years, like it's
Yeah.
wild. It's a real, as we go through difficult times in the world, it's definitely good, especially for some of us who like been around for a little longer. It's like, be grateful. Like, be grateful that you
Yeah.
can stay in your house and be safe and healthy and continue learning, continue creating all this stuff. It's a really, it's easy to get super negative in this moment, right? Because
Yeah.
and I know that a lot of people are going through like extreme
Absolutely. Yeah.
circumstances, right? And my heart definitely goes out to them. But for someone like me who's not super badly affected, I'm just super thankful to be in the situation that I'm in.
The Joe Code says, hey, and he can watch, and we can watch us chat about Unity and programming and game development. That's another funny thing, huh? Like we're all here quarantined, right? And we're just like having a great time.
Just I know, and Charles is in the U.S. I'm in Germany. Like it's this is kind of magic Star Trek level stuff that's going on here. Like it's pretty wild. Yeah.
Next thing we do is we gotta.
Oh, Andre's here. What's up, Andre?
Slap on your VR headsets and we can all be here together.
I know.
That's the next level. I want to do one of these live streams like in a VR room where we can all kind of hang out together.
We totally should. I've got my vibe here. We can get it on.
Heck yeah, dude. Really we'll talk. Well, after this, we'll figure something out.
Organize VR programming chat.
That'd be cool. We can do one in what are those rooms, like Rec Room or something like that, where we can or VR chat.
I just downloaded that actually. Yeah.
Heck yeah, dude. Yeah, hey, Mix and Jam, what's up, man? Look, I love it, man. I like seeing all the other creators come through here, and I feel like I need to start going out and joining y'all's live streams as well. But this is great. Good to see everyone here. I'm going to drop the link to we're doing a giveaway for all those who aren't aware. We're doing a giveaway. I just dropped the link in the chat for Rainbow Folders 2. So you just go in there, fill out the information. And I like to keep these to an hour and a half, and that's 5 minutes away. So I think we're going to get ready to wrap this up. But we will definitely be doing this again.
Yeah, and, for sure. Super fun coming on. I really appreciate your inviting me. It's been terrific. Yeah. And thank you for being here. Chat for joining. It's been super cool. Some great questions and comments coming from the chat. I guess maybe let's chat. If you have any last pressing questions, drop them in there and we can try to answer before we sign off.
Definitely. So I always say in these things that I'm going to make this weekly, but then, something always comes up. But, the goal is to make these like a weekly stream again. Next week, I'll be, I want to get his name right. I'll be doing a stream with another content creator. Let me pull his name up so I get it right. You may recognize him. Where is it? And Jonathan Thompson. Jonathan Thompson. Yeah. He's got a lot of videos on Unity Dots. So we're going to have in the same format that I'm here with Matt. We're going to be doing that with Jonathan. And then, I know Matt and I are going to talk about this afterwards. I'm sure we'll be coming back in the following weeks.
No, happy to come back whenever. Super, super fun being on here. I love talking about this stuff. So definitely would love to come back. And I'll just give my little plug here. I'm logged in the chat as the 1000 Ant channel, which is my new channel that I just started together with my partner, Sam. We're going to be publishing there weekly. I've also got my MirrorFish channel, which is I'm going to be slowing the content down on. So if you're interested in more videos about all these kind of topics, we also just released the teaser trailer for my partner Sam's game Skate Story, which is super cool. Skateboarding into the underworld video game that we're working on. So check that out. And I'll put our accounts in the chat. I'm at Matt MirrorFish on Twitter. And then also at 1000 Ant on Twitter is the other one as well. It wants to turn it into a username. But yeah, so check us out there and feel free to reach out, obviously. Oh, we also just set up a Discord, which I don't know the URL for. Hold on, I'll put it in there. But you can join us on there as well if you wanna chat about any of this stuff. We just are getting it set up and started.
After this, send me a list of links.
Oh yeah, I will. Perfect.
Hey, VR with Andrew. That's awesome. Hey, VR with Andrew. Great content, man. I as soon as I got my Quest, I dug into your channel. Good stuff, man. I love all the content creators out here. This is great. I really want to make this, and Matt, we really want to make this a thing where, you know, we're kind of getting us all together, and I don't know, we keep calling it level 2 Unity tutorials.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll stick.
Yeah.
Level up. No. Level up your Unity game.
Totally. No, I'm super into it, and yeah, like you said, it's really great to see folks coming together, and I think that you know, there's so many great folks doing stuff on their own. I think that you know, I would love to see more of these kind of collaborations. And obviously I'm looking to do some of this stuff myself, and I think you're doing a great job bringing folks together, Charles. So it's super cool.
Cool stuff. All right, let's go ahead and let's draw a winner here. So let's see how this works. I'm gonna go to winners, draw winners. All right, let's do it. Drum roll, please. Draw. It's calculating the winner. The winner is Karim Fidan. Sorry if I said your name wrong. Kareem Fidan. Congrats, man. Congrats. I'm gonna send you that that voucher, so keep an eye out for that. I see you have your email here, so I'll probably just drop it in an email. So cool, awesome. Man. Great. Well, thank you all for being here.
Thanks so much, Charles, thanks so much for having me on, and thanks everybody for joining. It's been amazing, and I can't wait to do it again.
Yes. If there's any content creators in the chat who would like to, you know, maybe get together and do one of these little hangouts, I am on the Slack, the Unity Slack influencers channel, so you can just find me there. And Matt, we're gonna do this again. This was a lot of fun. We had a great conversation, man. I really enjoyed this. It was a great start to my day. It's 7:30 a.m. where I'm at, so I'm about to start my work day. So this was a great way to start my Friday.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again. And thanks everybody for coming out.
Cool.
See you next time.
See you guys. Take care.